Hello, my friend, and welcome to the 448th episode of the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaeffer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. Today we have Mr. Steve Mast. He's a partner of Adam Froman, who was on 442. But they have a couple different businesses, and you will see some different approaches as to how to grow that business. So you are in for a treat. We're going to get into how to use data to be a better human, to sell more to humans, how to sell when the customer is in charge. And speaking of who's in charge, man, I don't even know who's in charge anymore. Certainly not this household. All of a sudden, the Schaeffer clan, 6 of the 7 kids, the wife and me, are heading to all over. Mount Zion, Albuquerque, probably crash in Amarillo, Fort Worth for my buddy's birthday, South Lake to hang out with my sister, Baton Rouge for a little family reunion, Houston, a little business and some friends, Austin for some business and some friends, Phoenix for some business and some friends. 3.5 weeks, we're going to be in an RV. Oh, man. Be 7 of us for the first, all the way to Dallas, and then my son's flying back. But me, my 5 daughters, and my wife. Wish me luck. So I'm going to be... been sitting here for the last little bit, looking at these interviews, moving some around, pushing back one of my book reviews. But got some good guests, so I'm going to be teeing them up so they are ready before I leave, and so these can go out on time. You know, I try to stick to a schedule. You know, it was weekly, then I had a bunch. Man, I was doing them every 2 or 3 days. Try to stick to one about every 4 days. The goal is to get to 1 interview every 4 days and 1 book review 4 days after that. So basically 1 interview every 8 days, 1 book review every 8 days. But I've been picking some big books and just juggling everything. I got to just haven't perfected that routine yet. But I'm getting there. I'm loving being on social media less and having real books in my hands. The problem for me is I'm reading it 3 times just about, because I'm underlining, I'm going back, jotting notes on the side, making sure I'm following, building the story so I can give it to you concisely. So we shall see. But it's a good experiment. But you know, we'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row now. Well, 5 in a row because it just released Trisha's last week. So, but you know, the work that goes into it's really not hard, but it's a lot of planning, you know, juggling things, getting the files ready, getting it to my team. You know, I got to do screenshots, all that good stuff. But, hey, it's a good problem to have. You know what I'm saying? And I keep seeing the growth of this medium. One of my clients I've had now for the last few months in a totally unrelated industry. An industry you've probably never interacted with, but it's important nonetheless. And I'm encouraging him to get started with one. And the cool thing, and I think it's still easy to do, but when I got started with this 7 years ago, 2013, it was literally no problem to reach out to big names, and they would say yes to coming on the show. I think it might be a little bit more of a problem now if you want to go get, famous people, if you will, even famous in your industry, because podcasting has grown. And as always, people take shortcuts, they bastardize things, and they make you look bad when you try to put out a good product. But the cool thing is you don't have to get superheroes. You don't need Tony Robbins or Oprah, right? You can be in a real niche. And you can, and here's the tip, here's a little secret, interview prospects. Make a list of your Dream 100 from The Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. Make that top 50, top 100, top 200, whatever. People you would want as customers, and now that becomes your cold call. You're calling them to invite them to be on your show. Now you get to hang out with them, you engage with them, you get their email, you get their cell phone, you chat a little bit beforehand, you chat afterwards, they get to know you, and business comes out of it. Dun, dun, dun. So be smart about it, okay? But I mentioned it last time, and I've been playing with this. I'm like, man, why didn't I do this a long time ago? We try to, fit in a format, a structure. We all fall for it to some degree or another, but it's like 3.5 years now, you've heard me talk about jiu-jitsu, and my whole life I've exercised, been lifting weights since, 2014, since I was 14, 1984. Taking supplements, protein shakes. I tried all these things. So just like I have the CRM Sushi podcast, I may make a supplement podcast. Although I don't take too many of them, but I am always trying to dial it in, make sure I've got the right thing. But, I made this last week, thesaleswhisper.com/fitness. It's a new affiliate link for me, going to the products I'm using right now. And I'm building out a page on my site to go into more in depth on those products as I use them. But for now, if you are looking for things to help you sleep better, things to help you focus, kind of a pre-workout / endurance sort of supplement, protein bars, protein shakes, even lifting equipment, kettlebells, things like that, go check them out. Okay. thesaleswhisper.com/fitness. If you are a veteran, they have discounts for you as well. So I will make a few nickels off of that. It doesn't cost you anything extra. But as soon as I finish this intro and outro, I am heading to my secret fight club. It's secret because the government hasn't given us permission to train. But I'm training anyway, as you should too, all right? But got to stay active. People have asked me, secret to my success, and if there is one, if there's one, there's three. One is I married well, so good luck with that. I hope you did that, and if not, I hope you can salvage it. I have always gone to church. I've kept my faith my whole life, always college, always, and I've exercised. Over the years, time to time, I had put on some pounds. I hover around 220 pounds. That's kind of my normal weight. Biggest I ever got was 241 pounds. And that was around 2001, I think. Then my wife got into Body for Life. My wife and I, our neighbors introduced us to it. And so I've been taking supplements, protein shakes, things like that ever since. And so it's cool to try some of these new things, see what's out there, but really, eat right and get some sleep. If you exercise hard, you're going to sleep well. So I sleep like a baby. But hey, I digress as usual. But do check that out, thesaleswhisper.com/fitness. That'll help me out a little bit. And, but like I said, look for more of that coming up. I'll really be able to spend more time on it probably starting in July, because most of June I'm going to be on the road. But I'll tinker with it. But if you take something you like, let me know. Hit me up in our group, theimplementors.com. Shoot me a note. I'd be happy to look at that and see what good stuff is out there. But you got some good stuff in here right now with Steve. Steve Mast, all the way from Toronto, President and Chief Innovation Officer of Delvinia. Welcome to the Sales Podcast, man. How the heck are you?
Very good, Wes. So we're not having the weather you've got down there, I think, in Southern California, since we're up here in Toronto, but it's we're surviving.
We've been cold and rainy here, but it is finally getting better. But we had your partner on, Adam Froman, and he told me he was the brains and the beauty of the company. So he said, I don't know if I should have you on. Is it good? Do you take that from him? Is he always that mean? I thought Canadians were nice.
Canadians are nice for the most part, but we do have a mean streak, and he's a different animal unto himself. So, but I like to think that it's the beauty of the beast, and you can kind of make the determination of who's who on that one.
Maybe it's just me stirring the pot. I'm the ugly American. So, all right, he didn't say that at all, but here we go, man. So, but y'all do some interesting things. So there's Methodify, there's Delvinia, but basically is it safe to say you're using data to kind of enter the prospect's mind to kind of figure out what they want maybe before they even know what they want?
That's exactly what it is. I mean, it's when you kind of think about it, traditional research or market research, or often it's called customer insight, whatever fancy term you want to call it, whatever, is fundamentally changed. I mean, you think of just the evolution of social media and social listening, ratings and reviews. All these things now are mechanisms where the consumer is in full charge. Your customer is in charge of everything, right? So, it used to be the old days of the snake oil salesman kind of knocked on your door and could sell you whatever they wanted. And then we kind of went through the era of the madman, and the madman kind of devised these messages that you'd watch on TV and radio. But that's all gone now. And the voice of the consumer is the most powerful voice out there. So how do you get in their head now? How do you stay ahead of them? And there's kind of some fundamental things that we look at. And one is, does there need to be new mechanisms to be able to do that? That could be methodologies, technology, a bunch of those kinds of things, just to study them themselves, right? And so beyond surveys and beyond those kinds of things. And then the other one is keeping up with just overall cultural trends, right? Like before you know it, blink of an eye, things have changed and things come out of nowhere, right? And how do you keep up with those trends? And, more importantly today than ever, it's not to be tone deaf. And how do you listen to their voices and not be tone deaf? And you find so much advertising and marketing now and just messaging is just so tone deaf, which I'm super surprised considering all these mechanisms that exist.
Yeah, I just played today I have a Monday group call, and a friend sent me this YouTube clip, and it's, I don't even know, over a dozen companies, big companies, Toyota, Buick, FedEx, Apple, and it's showing this whole COVID-19 thing, and it's every commercial is identical.
Right.
It's weird, right? It starts off this slow, somber music, and it shows like empty streets and maybe sad and lonely people. And it's all like, we're in this together. We're here for you for 72 years, for 100 years, for, 89 years, and on and on. And then it rises to crescendo and everybody's clapping. It's like, we're going to get through this together. We're here for you, and the happy music. And I'm like, holy crap. I mean, literally, I think the exact same company was hired to make the commercial for everybody. So,
yeah, I think there's probably.
So would you analyze? Would you come in before that and say, "Hey, here's the kind of commercial to make," or would you monitor it and say, "Hey, here's the impact of that. It's working or it's not working. Time to change it."
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, but more importantly, it's the beginning part, right? So. So often when you think of the process of how ideas sort of come to the marketplace, and you think about from the initial sort of pitch, maybe from the marketing agency or the ad company, and they come in with this great idea, this wonderful idea, and then the executives get and they go, well, let's change this, let's tweak this. What if we add this word? And then so they go back and they change it, and then it comes back and they go through the initial pre-production and kind of maybe create what's called an animatic, which is like a mock-up of what it might look like. And then they go, well, you know what? Like, where's our logo? We need our logo. Where's that sad song? Where's that?
Make the logo bigger.
Yeah, my nephew is connected with one of those Jenner kids. Like, let's get that Jenner kid in there. She's popular. And so all of a sudden what ends up happening is you get this monster of a thing that's created at the back end of it. And along the way, you've never asked your customer what they thought of it. You've never asked your core consumer what they thought of it, because it was too expensive. So traditionally what's happened is you do sometimes a large research study. Like larger companies might spend a lot of money up front, or even small companies do. And it's not cheap to do that. And then they get that nugget of insight and go, that's it. And then by the time it goes through that entire process and hits the marketplace, you've lost that essence of what you started with. So we have to change the paradigm now, where it has to be along the way, you're incrementally talking to your customers and showing them. And if it's something that doesn't exist yet, say it's a new product idea, right? Well, you don't want to show your competitors that. So how do you get a sense of what your customer and your consumer is going to think of that before it even hits market. That's the big change that's going on right now. Let me give you one example that happened. This is a big company. Do you know the Peloton cycle? Everybody's going nuts over these
Sure.
these $3,000 cycles that basically sit in your home and you go online and hook into a fitness group, whatever. They produced a commercial around the holiday times last November.
Yep.
Did you hear about this? And
they got skewered, and it was ridiculous because it was a good commercial.
It was. And that's the other thing too, is like, you never know. And, some people say, oh, well, it was, 100 people on Twitter that were mocking it or not liking it. But that took $1 billion out of the market value in 3 days, right? So not sales, but market value, right? So it has an effect. And all they really needed to do was just kind of check it with their customers to say, are we a little off brand? Are we on brand? Pepsi had one a few years ago, that same thing, where it literally got absolutely just panned by its customers. And it's amazed on the amount of money that's spent on these kinds of spots. And those are big brands, big companies. And yet they didn't listen to their customers along the way. It's simple things you can do now. And it's not that expensive to do these things now.
Well, but how, let's look at two things. One, how could a big company like that, what would they have done differently? And two, how can a little guy benefit from this, right? Because I just pulled up Peloton stock. I mean, over the last year, they're up from $25, and even with this downturn, well, they went as high as 36 last week, and they're at 31. So it looks like in December 2nd, they peaked at 36.84, and the ad came out. They went down to 27. And then, so they haven't, that was their peak, was December. But I mean, for the year, they're still up. So, would they run that ad, or would you help like find a focus group or something to say, what do y'all think about this ad? And what do you do if normal people should have liked that ad, and you get these trolls and these activists and whatever, and they can take you down even when you didn't even mean anything negative.
Yeah. It's hard. You're always going to have people out there that are going to be those sort of trolls. And I mean, there's unfortunately, that's just the case. And we live in an age now where social media, and I think that has more to do with big tech managing their giant platforms than it has to do necessarily with what a company can do. But if I would have been them at that point in time, and there's lots of other examples out there of organizations, I would have been testing along the way with the customers. And I don't even know if I'd be using focus groups necessarily. I would probably, like, focus groups have a purpose, right? They're really great for sort of that big initial getting a sense, but there's lots of issues with those as well. And they can be very expensive as well. I would have just taken a very simple thing where taken a subsection of my customers and then be along the way. Remember I was talking about that path of like the agency comes in and they show you the idea and then the executive. Well, each point in time along the marketing cycle, and everybody has sort of that marketing cycle, why don't you just take a test, take a point to say, what a temperature check, how are we doing? What do you think of this? Are we on the right path? So it's kind of like bringing the customer into the boardroom while you're developing it along with them. Instead of it just being, well, I'm the expert, or I own them, I have the marketing hat on, so therefore I'm the best. It's just including them in the process. And there's lots of examples out there, organizations that do that and are very successful on the other side of it, right? So I think everybody gets worried that the customer is going to, do you remember that episode? I don't know if you're a Simpsons fan or not, but years ago, when Homer makes that car, and it was literally the Homer reveal, and it was, just a mishmash of, and it's like just prime example of listen to your customers and see what you get. You get this like terrible thing. I don't think that's the case necessarily. I'm not saying you're going to listen to your customers 100%, but they are going to tell you whether or not maybe you're a little off, maybe the tone, maybe the culture has shifted, maybe the winds have changed out there, and you don't really have a pulse on exactly what's going on. So I would incrementally test with small sample groups along the way, like a couple hundred people. I wouldn't, it's not, you don't need big giant sample groups to be able to do this, just little tweaks along the way.
So what about the old adage, Henry Ford said, oh, if you asked the customer, they would have said that I wanted a faster horse. And, Steve Jobs says, I don't ask the customer because, I'll tell the customer what they want. I mean, I never could have said I want an iPhone, right? Google's coming out with their own phone. It looked just like a BlackBerry until the iPhone comes out. So how do you know if you're a Steve Jobs or if you're just a dude just trying to iterate and make a slightly better mousetrap?
Well, the funny thing is I hear that Steve Jobs thing all the time. And the reality is Steve Jobs actually was, everybody calls him, a brilliant marketer, which I agree, but he was so in tune with customers. And the reason why he was so in tune, because he was doing it iteratively. He was constantly checking the market and talking to people and having his people talk to people. I know his head of design, Johnny Ive, talked about it a lot. He spent more time out with customers than he did actually with his own design staff, right? Listening to them, tweaking the things, understanding what they're doing. And the other thing too is, and I'd argue Henry Ford was the same too. I know these guys go down in history as great inventors, but they were great innovators, right? They took a good idea and made it a lot better, because Jobs wasn't the first guy to come out with a smartphone. BlackBerry came out with a smartphone long before that. And they innovated that and created a great product. But I think they listened to their customer better than anybody listened to their customer. And I think they did it in an iterative way versus traditional market research might be where it's like this big research thing at the beginning. I think that's the fundamental thing that's changed. Like I always say to people, what Silicon Valley did in the tech space, where, like Google's talked about this 1,000 times, where it's like, we're going to release this new product to the market, and we're going to put it out to 500 of our customers, see how it works. And then they get some feedback and they tweak it. And then they put it out to 5,000 customers and they tweak it and the feedback. That's iterative. That's this whole idea of being more agile in the marketplace. And I think small businesses are built on being agile and pivoting and knowing their customers inside and out, right? So if there's anybody that could apply these things to it and understands that philosophy, it's small businesses.
So how can the little guy do this affordably and predictably?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's the other big thing that's happened over the last sort of 10 or 15 years is the cost of understanding your customers come down tremendously. I mean, like Google itself offers a tremendous amount of free resources where you can go on and do simple things like trend analysis, where anybody can do that. Like they're not difficult to do, right? So now that's very simple tools. And it's just, how are people searching? What are they searching for? Why are they searching? I mean, it's not difficult necessarily to do that. There's also lots of tools out there that you can do sort of in the moment testing, whether those are survey tools or, basic market research tools. There's lots of them out there that are very inexpensive. The predictability thing you bring up, I think, is the really interesting thing where, again, the last couple of years where you see how machine learning and artificial intelligence now starting to power these new engines where it takes a lot of that data that exists out there and it's mapping a path forward. It's simulating what the potential will be. And there's lots of examples out there of organizations that have created almost SaaS-like tools where you just log in and you can go into it and start to analyze your messaging. Or maybe you got a new product idea. There's a great one up here with this whole coronavirus thing where a pizza company, they put a lock on the pizza box. And so that you knew the pizza was safe. Once it left there, it was locked, right? And apparently how they got that idea was they were testing a bunch of ideas very quickly with their customer base. And they were using some of these predictive engines to say, okay, how are people going to react to this, right? So some of these things are very inexpensive now to sort of log into and access. It used to be, you don't need a room full of computers to be able to analyze very much data. You can do it on your phone now, right? So
I remember this comedian a while back, like when all this was taken off, like Uber Eats and stuff, right? People delivering your food. He's like, man, I am not trusting those people. He said, who has ever picked up fast food for their family and not eaten half the French fries before you get home, right? It's like, that guy, you know, he's going to be eating your French fries on the way. It's like, man, that's so true. So if they had a lock on my food, okay, I trust that company. You just driving around just tempted by smelling the fries. So, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
And yeah, I think part of it again is I kind of go back to what I was saying earlier about just being kind of in tune with your customers and not necessarily being told, because some of those things can just be sort of fun ideas, but it isn't necessarily going to do anything, right? So again, everybody's got lots of ideas, but what's wrong with just running it by your customers and seeing what they're going to think of it? I think that's just sort of a simple best practice. I don't think it's a mind-shattering thing.
but how honest are customers or just people in general on a survey? Because you see all the time. I mean, we saw this in the presidential elections, right? They're surveying, oh yeah, Hillary Clinton's going to win, 90-0, and she loses. And you see all the time as well. Hey, I'm going to launch this thing. Would you buy it? Oh yeah, I would buy it. And you go launch it, and like crickets.
Yeah.
I always said, I mean, look for how people spend their money. That's how you know what they like or they don't like.
100%. 100%.
So how honest are people on a survey?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways to weed out those individuals. I won't get into the difference of polling versus real surveying, because there is a difference between that. And there are mechanisms to weed out. And there also are, there's organizations out there that run sophisticated sampling and panel companies that have people that are basically dedicated to doing these things. So they're screened very carefully. So versus, and they're not cheap, like they're more expensive, versus when you're just sort of cold calling people or doing sort of random sample polling and things like that. So, but I won't get into that. But I think you just nailed it when you said, the pocketbook is the ultimate in sort of behavior and making sure that, but part of that is different data sets and bringing them together. I think that was the thing that everybody missed for a long time. And then this magic thing called big data came along, where it's like, oh, everything's collecting data and digital has got all this digital data dust and so on and so forth. But I think that's the thing. It's really bringing together. It's not one data set that tells you, right? So some kind of a little more sophisticated companies, what they're doing is they're bringing together not just survey data, but they're bringing together sales data and CRM data, and they're bringing all these things together. And then from there, they're building out predictive models of how the customers are really going to act. Because to your point, just because someone says something doesn't mean they're actually going to do that, right? There was I don't know if you know who David Ogilvy was, but he was
Sure.
kind of one of the original ad men. And he had this great quote. I use it all the time around. Consumers don't think how they feel, they don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say. And I mean, all that being said is it's really difficult to get in their head and understand what they're doing. Well, again, that's why you see kind of traditional market research kind of taking a dive, and now you see all this analytics data taking a spike where everybody is excited about that. But it's really just combining different data sets together to predict out behavior of what people are going to think and do, versus just relying on one set of data, like survey data as an example.
Yeah.
Oh, and just to add to that too, what I said before about doing more iterative and smaller sample versus a big sample. Used to be everybody wanted to do these large sample research projects. Let's survey whatever, 50,000 people or 100,000 people. And some of those things still happen. But a lot of this, just really what you need to do is just take a smaller sample and do it more often, little points in time, and course correct along the way. So, 200, 300 people, just do little bits at a time to kind of course correct things. That tends to even out over time in terms of if you've got people out there that aren't being truthful in their responses.
What about just exit surveys or net promoter scores and things like that? I mean, should companies be doing those?
Yeah, there was a lot of debate a few years ago about NPS and whether or not it was a valid way of really measuring whether customers are happy or not. And then, you heard all these people, salespeople were manipulating it where, I mean, everybody's sort of taking their car into service, and then, you get an email 15 minutes later, tell me how I did. And then the sales guy calls you like 5 minutes after that. Make sure you sign in everything 5 out of 5 stars. And so there's a lot of question around whether or not it's valid or not. And I don't know. I mean, I think that's sort of points in time. I believe that regular communication with your customers, NPS, although again, the actual methodology around it, I mean, you could maybe put that into question. But the idea of constantly asking customers, constantly closing the loop and making it easier to do, right? And the idea of don't ask me 15 questions when I leave. Like I got no time, right? Ask me 2 questions. Ask me, did I enjoy it? Just ask me a couple of things, and then from there you can indicate. I think the best thing that's happened, there's this company called You Got Junk. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're a Canadian company out of Vancouver. They just pick up your stuff, your junk, right? Yep. And I've used them a bunch of times. They have the most amazing closed loop customer model. So from the minute you call, you go in a database, you have the customer experience, and they close the loop. And I just to test it, I put in I didn't have a great experience. And I got to tell you, they immediately followed up. This is a big company. This isn't a small company. Although they did start as a very small 2 guys in a truck going around collecting junk. And they've kept this philosophy all the time. And then they immediately address the situation. So it has less to do with it all going into a centralized database to have this customer satisfaction score, which then pays salespeople out. It has more about closing the loop on the customer. Because I got to tell you, if I had a bad experience, which I have with brands, we all have, but if they contact me right away and they work on fixing the problem, isn't that a satisfied customer? So I think it's more about that closed loop versus it being more of a statistical analysis. I think that's where NPS and those things are very, very powerful.
Can you elaborate on that, on a closed loop? Because I mean, is it just as soon as the transaction is done, you're just making sure that they're happy? Is it more involved than that?
Yeah, I mean, there's been so much talk about it. I don't want to get into it, but there's been so much talk about the entire customer experience, right? The end-to-end sort of customer journey. There's lots of different ways of looking at it. But, now when a customer sort of enters into your organization, and again, with some pretty basic CRM tools, you can then capture the customer's information, follow them through whatever the transaction, whether it's online or physical. And then after the transaction, via whatever device you want to, or whatever mechanism, email, whatever you want to do, can follow up with how that transaction went on. And it's just really being able to sort of, and then feed that information back into their initial transaction. So they may have had a great experience at the beginning and their first touch point with the salesperson or whoever it might have been at the front desk might have been amazing. But then when they went through and the buying the product was great, but then they get to the end and it was just a terrible delivery experience or whatever it might be. Like companies like Amazon have perfected this, right? Like they've got it like a science now. And there's all kinds of simple tools. I'm amazed when I go on an e-commerce site and I don't see the ability to have ratings and reviews. People that are still afraid of putting ratings and reviews on their websites, I think is just a total miss, because there's tremendous learning you can get from customers providing honest feedback. And I'm more interested in the 1 star than I am the 5 stars. And that's what I mean by the closed loop, right? And then you're engaging that customer, and you can win customers back. Like I think people often think too much. It's like, oh, they gave me 1 star, or I had whatever disagreement with them. Out the door they go. And I totally disagree with that. I think there's lots of ways now, and especially with digital technologies, that you can set things up simply to win customers back and keep them because again, they go out and they tell 2 people about a bad experience, and then they tell you're not just losing one customer, you might be losing 100 customers. Versus I rather that person go, you know what, I had a bad experience, but they rectified it, they followed up, great company, try them out. That's a good closed loop experience.
Yeah. Well, it happened here. I mean, I've lived in this little town for 15 years now, and I'm a gun guy. I like guns. And I went to the local place, and they were terrible. and I gave them a 1-star review. And quite a while went by. I want to say a couple of years. And the daughter of the founder called me. And she says, hey, I'm, kind of back in charge, like work more closely with my dad. And, we kind of took our eye off the ball. Can you give me another chance? I was like, sure. And I went in, and they had improved things, and it was a great experience. And I bought a bunch of stuff from them. I brought friends over, recommended them, and totally changed it around. She didn't really make any excuses. Like, yeah, we kind of had some jerks working for us, and, give us another try. So
your story actually kind of brings it all really home when you think about it, that fine, it's about getting into the customer's head, but you've humanized it with your story, right? And there's so many of those stories out there. And if you can bring those stories back into the business and humanize it, it really will connect you with your customers in a real way. And I think we just, in a fast-paced, crazy world, well, obviously we're all on pause right now, but in this crazy world we live in, it's just, it seems like the most simple thing is just to get back to some basic human practices. And I think it all begins with just understanding that customer to the deep core, like not just about what's in their head, but what's in their heart, right? Like what's really driving their behavior. And it's usually their heart, right? It's not usually their head. And how do you get into that? And that's usually just real great basic customer service, customer practices. I forget I think it might have been a Walmart store. I can't remember. It was one of the big, and they talked about that, where they would just relentlessly spend time with the customers in the early days and just spend a lot. And they grew the brand that way. It might have been Walmart, but whoever it was, but that's a great example of that.
Yeah. Everybody, I mean, are we using technology too much? And like, are we afraid of being human now? Do we think there's an app for that?
Yeah, I've had this debate. I'm a tech guy. I'm a digital guy through and through. And I always talk about how digital sort of saved my life, but more ways than one. But I think it's a powerful, powerful tool. I think that's all it is. It's meant to make us better. And it's sort of a bit of a really frustrates me when I look at some of the things that how Facebook has evolved, and it just turned into a predator, right? And instead of being a powerful, powerful asset. Like people joke with it all the time, like some of the smartest people in the world are in Silicon Valley these nowadays, and the best they can do is figure out how to sell you Honda. Like, I just don't get it. I mean, like, why can't these super brilliant people be on top of, like, I kind of would have thought they would have had so much information and data that they would have been all over this COVID-19 and would have had, obviously not a vaccine, but would have had way ahead of time, hey, this is coming. Like their predictive engines, all those kinds of things. But, everybody's so caught up at, sort of selling you an ad that I think we lose sight of that a little bit. So I agree. I think there might be a little bit, but I think used in the right hands with the right technology, I think it could be a very powerful asset.
Yeah. Very cool, man. Well, where should people go to learn about you? I've got a link here to Methodify. Is that the best place to send them, or is you have kind of reports or resources?
If you go to, it's a couple things. One, if you go to delvinia.com, that's our sort of corporate homepage. So Methodify is one of our businesses and products within that, but you'll find everything in delvinia.com. And I also want to just mention as well that one of the things we did start back at the beginning of this whole COVID-19 was we actually started to pull together resources. Some of those, they're all free resources. Some are research reports, some are things to help you. So we even have some very cool AI tools on there as well that you can kind of look at your audience and sort of predict out where things are going as well. So if you go to delvinia.com/coronavirus, there's a whole listing of free tools there. I encourage anybody to go to that and use whatever you will. It's just, we're trying to do whatever we can do to sort of help this. So, so that's kind of that's my only pitch, if you will.
Oh, so I went here and you're just trying to sell me a Honda, man. There's Honda ads everywhere. Oh, here's a Toyota. Fine. Okay. I take it back.
There you go. There you go. I was going to say, there's got to be a GM in there or something somewhere.
Very cool. Yeah. All right. Keep your brand safe during COVID-19. Managing client anxiety during COVID-19. Yeah. And a bunch of others. Very cool. All right. I will link to that. And all right, man. This is cool. Did I miss anything, man? Is there something you wish I should have asked? Like that key talking point, like you were just on the tip of your tongue?
You know what? I think the big thing we covered was just, put the customer at the heart of everything you do, and don't be afraid to try some of these new tools out there. They are super inexpensive, super easy to use. And that would be the core message. I've been a marketer for a long time and a tech guy for a long time. And, I used to kind of, I think, be the guy that thought I knew everything. And, I quickly learned the customer is really in charge and they know everything. And the closer you get with them, the better you're going to do.
Yeah, it was Ogilvy that said that your customer is not a moron. She is your wife. All right, so
there you go.
And I've used that so many times, because they would talk down to them, and he's like, stop talking down to these people. Obviously back then the wife stayed home and the men had 3 martini lunches. And so it was a male dominated marketing for sure. But I've always thought about that. I use that analogy a lot. It's like, these people aren't idiots. Yeah, you may know more about them, or you may know more about a narrow niche in the world, but overall, I mean, they're not fools. So act and sell accordingly.
Yeah, I used to love being in a boardroom, and back kind of I had a consulting hat on for a long time, and you'd see the oldest guy in the room. And I remember we were dealing with it was a women's product company, and the oldest guy in the room leans back and he goes, well, let me put the customer hat on for a second. And I'm like, you're going to put on a 16-year-old woman's hat and you're what, 52? Like, how does that work? Right. So, and then they would go on to pontificate on how much they knew the customer. And I used to, it never sat with me well, and never understood that. So I do think I do think it's really important to just get in their head and understand them.
That was Mel Gibson, right? Putting on pantyhose and lipstick, that's right, and falling in the bathtub.
That's right. I forgot about that movie. That was classic. Yeah.
Oh, man. Very cool. Well, I will let you get to it, man. Steve Mast from Toronto. Thanks for coming to the show, man. It's been great.
Great. Thanks, Wes. Really appreciate it.
Have a good day. Go back to human practices. Amen. It's kind of crazy, huh? The more technology we use and the more it just enters our lives, the more just getting away from it helps you grow your sales. I love it. I love this quote he gave from David Ogilvy. The trouble with market research is that consumers don't think how they feel. They don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say. Amen. You've got to listen to your little voice, all right? Trust your intuition. It needs to be formed properly, though. You're not just gifted with clairvoyance. Maybe one of you is, but I doubt it. The intuition, the gut feel comes from experience. I forget the exact verbiage, but it's, basically you have You have to have the discipline to master the principles, so then you can break them. But you got to master them first. You got to master the fundamentals. And it's not easy. It's not sexy. You know, between the intro and this outro here, I went to jiu-jitsu, and it's the fundamentals. You know, I fought 4 guys, and actually the instruction for today was something I'd forgotten. 2 things, actually, that I had forgotten. 2 variations of the same move. And, you know, the problem for me was it's based off of a position that is kind of my go-to position. And there were 2 variations 2 branches off of that position that I just have forgotten to use. But, you know, I've only been doing this 3.5 years, and it sounds like a long time, but when you're fighting guys with 12 and 20 years of experience, it's, you know, I'm a first grader and they're high school and college, you know, PhDs. So you've got to remember each of these little things, but we don't have the time or the patience to go through those motions, to go through the drills. You know, he showed us the move, and then boom, we practice it for 10 minutes, just one move. And then showed us another thing, boom, another 10 minutes practicing that one move. And then you spar. I sparred 4 times and tried that move on guys. And so, but on all 4 of my fights today, I didn't use anything exotic. And I fought, 2 white belts. So they're below me, but both of them are 22, 25 years old. Huge giants. And held my own against them. Fought a purple belt, 3-stripe purple belt. So an entire belt higher than me. I'm a 3-stripe blue belt. Held my own with him. Finished on top. Then who else? Oh, a smaller white belt who's actually a strong guy. He's pretty new. And but the moves I did on him were fundamental. You know, it's that wax on, wax off. We don't want to do it. We get tired. We get bored. We want new and we want fancy. But, you know, the crazy thing is the new and the fancy is only an edge for a moment. And then it goes back to being me too. And then when it's me too, how do you separate yourself? How do you differentiate yourself? It's by being human. Go back to being human, okay? Be agile. The cost of understanding your customers have come way down. Amen. But what are you doing with that knowledge, with that wisdom, okay? Too many people aren't doing enough with it. They're taking it for granted. They're ignoring them. Don't do that. Be human. All right? You've heard me talk about it last episode and this one as well, but to be more human, you got to feel more human. You got to train. You got to exercise. You got to fuel your body, train your body. Go check out thesaleswhisperer.com/fitness. Get you some protein. Get you some krill oil for your aching joints. Get you some kettlebells. Build up the muscles. You'll feel better. When you feel better, I guarantee you'll sell more. All right? I guarantee it. And if you check out the homepage of the Sales Whisperer, I've been making some changes, doing more private coaching and short-term consulting. Typically, it's a 3-month engagement. So if you want make some sense, you want some help making sense out of these crazy times, under this new normal, under these unprecedented times, if you want to not sound like those idiots, go to thesaleswhisperer.com, fill out the Talk with Wes, and let's see if there's a way for us to work together. And let me help you through these unprecedented times to make your own new normal and make that new normal more profits. All right? That's what I do, my friends. So, hey, please share this. Please subscribe so you get every episode. Makes the numbers go up. Helps me get more better guests and make more money without charging you anything. Okay? Thanks for listening. I'll go sell something.